Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Leslie Nathaniel, and he will be doing for us A Lovely Day for Cricket by Lord Relator. Leslie, all is yours.
Well, a lovely day for cricket. Blue skies, gentle breeze. The Indians are waiting to play the West Indies. Now a signal from the umpire. The game's about to start. The cricketers come on the field. They all look very smart. Irapali Prasima, Gigi Boy Wadika, Krishnamurti and Vishnu Mankan. Them boys could well play cricket in any kind of wicket to make the West Indies team look so bad. We was in all kind of trouble. Joey Carew pull a muscle. Clive Lloyd get about 3 run out. We was in trouble without a doubt. It was Gavaskar, the real master. Just like a wall. We couldn't stop Gavaskar at all. Not at all, you know. The West Indies couldn't out Gavaskar at all. Venkatarakavan, Bedi in a turban, Vijay Jaisima, Jayantilal, them helped to win the series against the West Indies in Sabina Park and in Queen's Park Oval. Now, 158 from Kanai really set me hopes up higher. Noriega, 9 for 95. Yeah, the Indian team still survive. Gavaskar, the real master. Just like a wall, we couldn't out Gavaskar at all, not at all, you know. The West Indies couldn't out Gavaskar at all. Govindraj, Durrani, Sulka, Abid Ali, Dilip Sadiswai, Bisnawat, them make the West Indies bowlers look like second raters when they come out to bat. West Indies try Holder and Kid boys. We no other choice. They even try with Ultan Dow. But I'm sure they're really sorry that they bring him out now. Because Gavaskar, the real master, just like a wall, we could not Gavaskar at all. Not at all. The West Indies could not Gavaskar at all. Little Desmond Lewis and also Charlie Davis, they take little shame from out of we face. But Sobers, as captain, he won plenty coaching before he could end up in a disgrace. Betty here, he became a father. He caught out hold up in the cover. But when Sobers heard that he too had a son, he make a duck and gone back in the pavilion. But Gavaskar, the real master, just like a wall, we couldn't out Gavaskar at all. Not at all, you know. The West Indies couldn't out Gavaskar at all. The West Indies couldn't out Gavaskar at all.
Gail Bernard is going to read us a lovely poem about Ganga and Sora. Do you know who Ganga and Sora is? If you do know, let us know in the chat. People on Facebook, tell us in the comments now. Do you know who Ganga and Sora is? Mrs. Bernard, when you're ready, you go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a little background about Ganga and Sora. The legend has it that in the 18th century, Ganga and Sora flew from Africa to Tobago to find her stolen family in Likoto. And she stayed there in Likoto to look after the enslaved people, and she worked as a midwife and a healer woman. She married a slave called Tom, and they became the favored servants of plantation owner grandfather Peter of Golden Lane. When Tom died, Sarah decided to fly back to Africa, and she climbed a huge silk cotton tree. She launched herself into the air, but instead of flying, she fell down from its branches and she died. The folks of Golden Lane say it was because she had eaten food that had what? Salt, that had been cooked with salt. Sarah was buried with Tom on the plantation cemetery, and their names were engraved on a headstone there. And to this day, the headstone and silk cotton tree still standing right there. So the next time we get a chance to go to Tobago, you know what you have to go and look for. I'm going to be doing the Ballad of Ganga and Sora. So it's a ballad, so it's not just a story, but it's a story song. So I begin. It is from theriverstories.com. Ganga and Sora of Tobago sit beautiful at night, and met her Tom on river stone until the morning light. But love wasn't no easy road, and lovers sacrifice. Sarah, all her daylight power, and Tom, his youthful life. Ganga and Sora is the sea breeze, Ganga and Sora is the wind, Ganga and Sora is the whisper of Golden Lane. Ganga and Sora's spirit child, in her homeland, she could fly, but she get blown far from home on a starless, stormy night, across the seas on the wind to the village of Lekoto, where she and her big Tom met, and love surely did grow. But sorrow cried, love was denied. The day owner Peter came to stay. One look at Sarah, he decided to have her, steal her away to Golden Lane. Tom returned home to find love gone and follow his love to claim. But owner Peter had him arrested to execute in Golden Lane jail. Ganga and Sora is the sea breeze, Ganga and Sora is the wind, Ganga and Sora is the whisper on Golden Lane. When Sarah heard Tom was captured, she made a bad bargain that day. She knew she could fly. So for love life, say yes. With owner Peter, she stayed. If Tom was spared death and only banished, she'd eat the feast that was laid. And biding her time, she agreed to dine to seal the deal she make. One sad rule for Sarah: her spirit power to persist. No salt by accident or plan could dare to pass her lips. And owner Peter smiled when Sarah realized salt was in the rice and fish. And owner Peter smiled when Sarah cried, cause she knows she get tricked. Ganga and Sora is the sea breeze, Ganga and Sora is the wind, Gangang Sara is the whisper on golden lane. Tom, big Tom, hear Sarah call, and no deep down love done lost. Yet day after day he watched the village come wind, sunshine, or storm. And Sarah see him there year after year and whisper to him of her love and promise to meet him in Lekoto though all her powers was gone. Till the day come, Owner Peter pass away, the earth and the moon align. A mighty great wind blow down the hill, and once more Sarah could fly over shores and trees to find her lost Tom and sit at the riverside. And now she's the breeze, the whisper in trees, Gangang Sara, golden lane. Gangang Sara is the sea breeze. Gangang Sara is the wind. Gangang Sara is the whisper on golden lane. Thank you.
And Corinne is going to read for us, or to give us, a Tobago speech band speech. So Corinne, when you're ready, all is yours.
I could have never believed we would get the death news in the market. The man family have to look for casket. They wonder if she could make jail for long. Any woman who could kill she husband must be strong. All who ever get love letter have to cherish it like gold. Because that only used to happen long ago. Because no man know I express their love on paper. Everybody glad they get computer. Day and night, they chatting like they hook. So just now, man and no man go marry on Facebook. All they could tell me how man used to live so long. They say it's all them growing provision used to make them healthy and strong. Me hear early morning, them used to get up and go up bush. Then come back and bust wood to cook. An old man say, if man want to get long life, they must content with only one wife. I want everybody to know that Tobago men does drink plenty cocoa. They say it's good for your heart, does prevent diabetes and reduce blood pressure, even enhance sexual pleasure. So to all you Trini here tonight, using cocoa products, better than Viagra. We want to invite all you to a beautiful island, especially you lovers who planning to get married soon. Come to Tobago for all your honeymoon. And ladies, I don't know if it's the refreshing breeze, but I hear when all you leave, all you must conceive. Drag your bow, Mr. Fiddler.
That's how we live. I wish I had a stick. No, wait.
This one is called Going to Port of Spain. I wrote this last week sometime when Tony indicated that we want to talk about Port of Spain because I was a country boy from Pinal. But here we go. I first visited Port of Spain when I was 17. I passed my GC and was looking for work. Before this, the furthest I had traveled by myself was from Pinal to Sando to attend high school at Modern Sec. I remember when I passed common entrance, my mother took me to register at the school, and then we took a photo at Chong's studio near the library, brought some things on High Street, and then went home. Even then, my mother made sure that I accompanied an older boy who was going to Astra Boys, which was next to Modern Sec. Later on, as I became familiar with San Fernando, I would take a taxi on Friday evenings from La Vicona to Marabella, where my mother had a stall. I remember as a little boy of about 8, my father, who had a taxi, taking the entire family, my 4 sisters and mother, to see the lights at Aranguez one Diwali night. We stayed in the Zephyr and drove around. I still remember how magical the deer seemed on the various bamboo stands. Although I have seen many more elaborate displays in the many years of my life, this Diwali remains the most amazing I've ever seen. My father wanted to take us to see Port of Spain, but my mother said that my 2 smaller sisters was asleep, so we headed back to Pinal. As a primary school child, when I was in Standard 4, I went on a school outing by bus. We stopped at the Solo factory and then at the top of the lookout on the Lady Young Road and saw Port of Spain with its tall buildings and the sea and the port in the distance. Next, we passed the upside-down Hilton Hotel and stopped by the zoo. By the time we had finished our lunch at the Botanic Gardens, it was time to go home. I was still yet to see Port of Spain. By the time I started high school, my father had given up driving, being a taxi driver, having crashed his car while driving under the influence. My mother, who had on previous occasions sold our cow and pawned her necklace and bearers to pay for repairs, had nothing to help fix the car now. So the car was sold, and my father began working with a contractor at the Point of Terre refinery. The other time I came close to visit Port of Spain was when I was in Form 4. My elder sister, having passed her school leaving exam, was given a spot as a monitor at the Suchitrace Hindu school. She had to be interviewed by Mr. Bade Sagan Maharaj, who was then the head of the Mahasabha. My parents somehow put together the money to hire a car to take us to Bade's place in Valsine. Since the car was already paid for, the entire family went. While my parents and elder sister went to Mr. Maharaj's office, my smaller sisters and I stood in awe looking at the swimming pool that we were warned not to go near to. The driver remained in the car. I asked my mother if we could go to Port of Spain, but the driver wanted more money, so we headed home after the interview. It's quite Valsine we reached, but we never reached Port of Spain yet. Mr. Suklal worked in Port of Spain. He left Gopi Trace at 6 a.m. every morning and returned at 6 p.m. in the evening. He worked in the Red House. He was always well dressed with white shirt and tie. All the boys wanted to be like Mr. Suklal or Mr. Ratiram, who was a teacher at the Vedic school and also wore white shirt and tie. When I passed my exam, I asked Mr. Suklal to bring two application forms for me. One was for employment in the civil service, and the other was for employment in the teaching service. I filled out the forms and got my certificates and recommendations together. Since the teacher's application required a teacher's registration certificate only available at the Ministry of Education, my mother decided that we would go to Port of Spain to the Education Ministry and also the Service Commission and deliver both applications. I wore my old school pants and a white shirt, my best clothes. My mother, who was also a seamstress, made a new dress and had on her orni, for she never left home without it. 6 a.m. and we were waiting for Mr. Suklal to pass. Fare to Sando was 20 cents per person, and from Sando to Port of Spain was $1 by taxi. Mr. Suklal gave a running commentary as we headed to town. We passed through Marabella and then Point of Terre refinery, which smelled like rotten eggs and had flames shooting in the air. Hydrogen sulfide and extra gas burning, said Mr. Suklal. Later on, we saw Federation Chemicals. I made a mental note to apply to these two companies. As the taxi speeded up, Mr. Suklal noted that we were in McBean, on the McBean stretch, a long piece of straight roadway that motorists took advantage of. Through Freeport, Couva, and Chaguanas, these names slipped in smoothly from Mr. Suklal's tongue as I repeated them in my mind, savoring the thought of actually being in places I had only heard of. The taxi speeded up. We were on the Princess Margaret Highway. With the wind in our faces, we could hardly hear what Mr. Suklal was saying. We passed the Caroni River, and I was disappointed that it was so small, having learned since primary school that it was the largest river in Trinidad. Onto the Churchill Roosevelt Highway, where I recognized the Solo factory from a primary school outing of long ago. And then the drunk man vomit smell that greeted us as we entered the Beacon Highway. If my nose was assaulted by the smell, my eyes were soon walloped by the sight of the unsightly shacks built at the edge of the highway. Even the many carrot and wood wall homes in our village were neater than those. We passed the lighthouse in the middle of the road and turned right onto the wonder that was Port of Spain. So many big buildings house the many banks. I must apply to the banks, I mentally noted. And there was Salvatore's building that I have heard of. And so many cars, and so many people, all in a hurry at 7:30 in the morning. As I stood staring with an open mouth, Mr. Suklal hurried me up to follow him. At his place of work at the Red House, he directed us to the Service Commission's desk, giving further directions as to where the Ministry of Education was located. He then went to his job. At the Ministry of Education, I paid $5 to register as a teacher and got a certificate, registration number 11,309, which I have to this day. I left my application and never heard from them up to this time. As we left for home, I took a drink of water from the cooler in the lobby. The water tasted different in Port of Spain than what we had in Pinal. 2 months later, I got a job at TNT Port of Spain Power Station. I rented a room in French Street and started to really know Port of Spain. I used to take the elevator to the top of the building on the 3 to 11 shift and marveled at the sights and lights in all directions. During carnival season, I would hear the calypsos from the original Young Brigade from across the Wrightson Road. I had my first chicken and chips from Royal Castle, tasted paws and arepas from Kong Chow, and I swear that the best roti and chicken came from Mongols that used to be around the savannah. I tasted beer and rum, and visited nightclubs like Mirama and learned about the female anatomy. In the 1 year I worked at Port of Spain, I felt that I finally grew up becoming a young man and independent. When I was transferred to the Pinal Power Station, I was very sad to miss the town life. Thank you.
The Little Red Hen. A little red hen lived in a barnyard. She spent almost all of her time walking about the barnyard in her pickety-peckety fashion, scratching everywhere for worms. She dearly loved fat, delicious worms and felt they were absolutely necessary to the health of her children. As often as she found a worm, she would call, "Chuck, chuck, chuck," to her chickies. When they were gathered about her, she would distribute choices, morsels of her tidbit, a busy little body she was. A cat usually napped lazily in the barn door, not even bothering herself to scare the rat who ran here and there as he passed. And as for the pig who lived in the stay, he did not he did not care what happens, as so long as he could eat and grow fat. One day, the little red hen found a seed. It was a wheat seed, but the little red hen was so accustomed to bugs and worms that she supposed this to be some new and perhaps very delicious kind of meat. She bit it gently and found that it resembled a worm in no way whatsoever. As to taste, although because it was long and slender, a little red hen might easily be fooled by this appearance. Carrying it about, she made many inquiries as to what it might be. She found it was a wheat seed, and that if planted, it will grow up, and when ripe, it will be made into flour and then into bread. When she discovered that, she knew it ought to be planted. She was so busy hunting for food for herself and her family that naturally she thought she ought not to take time to plant it. She thought of the pig, upon whom time must hang heavily, and of the cat who had nothing to do, and of the great fat rat with his idle hours, and she called loudly, "Who will plant the seed?" But the pig said, "Not I," and the cat said, "Not I," and the rat said, "Not I." "Well then," said the little red hen, "I will." And she did. Then she went on with her daily duties through the long summer days, scratching for worms and feeding her chicks, while the pig grew fat, and the cat grew fat, and the rat grew fat, and the wheat grew tall and ready for harvest. So one day the little red hen chanced to notice how large the wheat was and that the grain was right. She ran about calling briskly, "Who will cut the wheat?" The pig said, "Not I." The cat said, "Not I." And the rat said, "Not I." "Well then," said the little red hen, "I will." And she did. She got the sickle from among the farmer's tools in the barn and proceeded to cut off all of the big plants of wheat. On the ground lay the nicely cut wheat, ready to be gathered and threshed. But the newest and yellowest and downiest of Mrs. Hen chicks set up a peep peep peeping in their most vigorous fashion, proclaiming to the world at large, but most particularly to their mother, that she was neglecting them. Poor little red hen, she felt quite bewildered and hardly knew where to turn. Her attention was sorely divided between her duty to her children and her duty to the wheat, for which she felt responsible. So again, in very hopeful tone, she called out, "Who will thresh the wheat?" But the pig with a grunt said, "Not I." And the cat with a meow said, "Not I." And the rat with a squeak said, "Not I." The little red hen, looking, it must be admitted, rather discouraged, said, "Well, I will then," and she did. Of course, she had to feed her babies first, though, and when she had gotten them all to sleep for their afternoon nap, she went out and threshed the wheat. Then she called out, "Who will carry the wheat to the mill to be ground?" Turning their backs with a snippy glee, the pig said, "Not I." The cat said, "Not I." And the rat said, "Not I." So the good little red hen could do nothing but say, "I will then." And she did. Carrying the sack of wheat, she trudged off to the distant mill. There she ordered the wheat ground into beautiful white flour. When the miller brought her the flour, she walked slowly back all the way to her barnyard in her own pickety-peckety fashion. She even managed, in spite of her load, to catch a nice juicy worm now and then, and had one left for the babies when she reached them. Those cunning little fluff balls were so glad to see their mother for the first time they really appreciated her. After this really stre- strenuous day, Miss Hen retired to her slumber earlier than usual. Indeed, before the colors came into the sky to herald the setting of the sun, her usual bedtime hour. She would have liked to sleep late in the morning, but her chicks joining in the morning chorus of the hen yard drove away all hopes of such luxury. Even as she sleepily half opened one eye, the thought came to her that today the wheat must somehow be made into bread. She was not in the of making bread, although of course anyone can make it if he or she follows the recipe with care, and she knew perfectly well that she could do it if necessary. So after her children were fed and made sweet and fresh for the day, she hunted up the pig and the cat and the rat. Still confident that they will surely help her some day, she sang out, "Who will help me make the bread?" Alas, the little red hen once more her hopes were dashed. For the pig said, "Not I." The cat said, "Not I." And the rat said, "Not I." So the little red hen said once more, "I will then," and she did, feeling that she might have known all the time that she would have to do it all herself. She went and put on a fresh apron and a spotless cook's cap. First of all, she set the dough as was proper. When it was time, she brought out the molding board and the baking tins, molded the bread, divided into loaves, and put them in the oven to bake. All the while the cat sat lazily by, giggling and chuckling. And close at hand, the vain rat powdered his nose and admired himself in the mirror. In the distance could be heard the long-drawn snorts of the dozing pig. At last, the great moment arrived. A delicious odor was wafted upon the autumn breeze. Everywhere, the barnyard citizens sniffed the air with delight. The red hen ambled in her pickety-peckety way towards the source of all the excitement. Although she appeared to be perfectly calm, in reality she could only with difficulty restrain an impulse to dance and sing, for had she not done all the work on this wonderful bread? Small wonder that she was the most excited person in the barnyard. She did not know whether the bread would be fit to eat, but joy of joys, when the lovely brown loaves came out of the oven, they were done to perfection. Then, probably because she had acquired the habit, the little red hen called, "Who will eat the bread?" All the animals in the barnyard were watching hungrily and smacked their lips in anticipation. And the pig said, "I will." The cat said, "I will." And the rat said, "I will." But the little red hen said, "No, you won't. I will." And she did. The end.
Okay, so Auntie Antoinette with the Armadillos Song. You go right ahead.
The Armadillo Song. There once lived an armadillo who loved music more than anything else in the world. After every rainfall, the armadillo will drag his shell over to the large pond filled with frogs, and he will listen to the big green frogs singing back and forth to each other in the most amazing voice. Oh, thought the armadillo. Oh, how I wish I could sing. The armadillo will creep to the edge of the water and watch the frogs leaping and swimming in a frantic green valley. And they would call back and forth in a beautiful musical tone. He loved to listen to the music made as he spoke, though he didn't understand their words, which was just as well, for the frogs were laughing at this funny animal that wanted so badly to sing like a frog. "Don't be ridiculous," sang the frogs as they played. "Armadillos can't sing." Then, one day, a family of crickets moved into a new home near the armadillo. He was as amazed to hear them chirping and singing as merrily as the frogs. He would creep near their home and listen all day and all night to their musical songs. "Oh," sighed the armadillo, "oh, how I wish I could sing." "Don't be ridiculous," sang the crickets in their dulcet tone. "Armadillos cannot sing." But the armadillo could not understand their language, and so he just sighed with longing and listening to their beautiful voice laughing at him. Then one day, a man came down the road carrying a cage full of canaries. They were chirping and fluttering and singing songs that were more beautiful even than those of the crickets and the frogs. The armadillo was entranced. He followed the man with the cage down the road as fast as his little legs could carry him, listening to the canaries sing. "Oh," gasped the armadillo, "oh, how I wish I could sing." Inside the cage, the canaries twittered and giggled. "Don't be ridiculous," sang the canaries as they flapped about. "Armadillos can't sing." The poor, tired armadillo could not keep up with the man and the cage, and finally he fell exhausted at the door of a great wizard who lived in the area. Realizing where he was, the armadillo decided to beg a boon of a man. Timidly, the armadillo approached the wizard, who was sitting in front of the house, and he said, "Great wizard, it is my deepest desire to learn to sing like the frogs, the crickets, and the canaries." The wizard's lips twitched in a little amazement, for he had never heard of an armadillo that could sing. But then he realized the little creature was serious. He bent low to the ground and looked the creature in the eye. "I can make you sing, little armadillo," he said, "but you do not want to pay the price, for it will be your debt." "You mean if I die, I will be able to sing?" asked the armadillo in amazement. "Yes, this is so," said the wizard. "Then I want to die right now. I will do anything to be able to sing." The wizard and the armadillo discussed the matter for many hours, for the wizard was reluctant to take the life of such a fine armadillo. But the creature insisted, and so the wizard finally killed the armadillo and made a wonderful musical instrument from his shell and gave it to the finest musician in the town to play. Sometimes the musician will play the instrument by the pond where the frogs live, and they will stare at him with big eyes and say, "Aye, aye, the armadillo had learned to sing." Sometimes the musician will play his instrument by the house where the cricket live, and they will creep outside and stare at him with big eyes and say, "Aye, aye, the armadillo has learned to sing." And often the musician would visit the home of his friend who owned a cage full of canaries, who was also a musician, and the two would play their instrument while the little birds watched and fluttered their wings and twittered in amazement. "Aye, aye, aye, the armadillo has learned to sing." And so it was. The armadillo had learned to sing at last. But like the very best musicians in the world, the armadillo had to sacrifice his life for his art. The end.
To Nikella. Nikella Jones is going to read for us the story Father, Father. And the story is by Garfield Ellis out of Jamaica. So Nikella.
Hey, I'm here.
All
I'm
right,
right
Nikella.
here.
You go right ahead
All
with
right.
Father, Father.
All right. So it's Garfield Ellis, Father, Father from Jamaica. Call your father now, now. My breath is hot in my nostrils. Tears of anger burn my eyes as I run, and the blood drips down my face where a stone has burst my head. Call your father now, now. There are 3 boys after me. 1, I could beat easily. 2, I could take a chance and stand and fight. But 3 is too much. They have my knapsack. I had to leave it as the ugly one grabbed it, twisting my neck as he pulled at it to try to stop me. But I swiveled hard and left it in his hand. Dirt splatters from a wall in front of me as a rock is thrown at my head. I run and zigzag through the narrow lane. Call your father now, now. Touch me, I had said. Lay 1 finger on me or any of my friends, and I will call my father to lock you up and make them run you and your family out of the dirty cane field hut you live in. My father is in charge of all cane fields from here to Clarendon. Touch me now, open your mouth, and I call my father, and you and all your ugly family will turn beggars. A shove had gone with that threat. Little boy in torn khaki was at the end of that shove, standing there with his friend trying to hustle money from us, John and me, saying how he liked my shoes. Young, snarling, dirty boys who hardly pass through the school gate except to get their names noted on the register once or twice a week. Sullen boys, dirty boys with downturned eyes, hating school as much as school hated them. Maybe because they smell so much. Too poor to change their clothes or bathe anywhere except in the irrigation canal that fed the cane fields. Their skin was as chalky and scaly as fish left to die in the sun. Always there, standing at the gate, intimidating those they could, fondling the girls and threatening those they think are soft. But I would not be soft. I stood up to them. You never had to insult them, so we could have just walked them out, John said. I never insult them. I just tell them the truth. But we could have just walked them out, leave them alone. Them will kill you. Those people have guns. Sure, they don't want me to call my father. Now they chase me down a lane that leads to a place I don't know. And where's John? Disappeared the moment he saw them? Isn't he the one who got me into this? Isn't he the one I defended when I took them on? Isn't he the one I offered to follow home, though it was miles out of my way because he was scared to pass alone through the area where these dirty, ugly boys live? Now I'm alone, far from home and even further from the safety of the school crowd where I took them on. There is no shelter here in Portmore, just the sun beating down on this concrete gully with its intermittent tracks of dirt. I am running from one strange lane to another. I don't know where I'm going, and I'm running out of breath. Call your father now. I wish I could call him. I wish he would come, drive his big car, park it at the end of the alley down which my tired legs now falter, open his arms to my charge while lifting his larger-than-life self to its full height, raising his hand like Moses, pushing back at the sea, like the great defender I boast him to be. Touch my big son, just one hair on his head. If you think, you're bad. But I'm alone. I have no father to rescue me. Call your father now. I'm tired. The open fences, dirty houses are all part of one hot, hazy blur around me. I cannot go much further. A large lamppost looms. It is a crossroad with an alleyway to the left and right. I brace myself, swing right. The feet behind me are closer and seem multiplied in my ears. I swerve around the corner and before me are houses on every side. Then there is a cul-de-sac with a narrow lane feeding off to the left. It is the only escape from this box that traps me. But standing there is a snarling boy with a knife in his hands, and I have been herded into dead end. I pull up quickly, but lose my footing and fall, skating in the dust on the seat of my pants till my backside burns from the gravel. Call your father now. Anytime you need me, he said, just call, man, and I will come. I now realize how deceitful a promise that had been. For how I can call him. How do I know where he is at any time of day? And even if I did, by what means would I reach him? How stupid I was to believe that I could call, and even more stupid to think that he would come. Call your father. Call me when you're ready. Though he knows I have no way to do so. I will come when you want. Though he knows he will never come, will never be there when I want, nor will he be there when I return home after I have been beaten. Big son, my big son. Big son? Maybe after this, when I'm dead, he will come. Maybe then he will find me. Who he has neglected. Big son? Yes, big son. In the dust now, face down by a knife and 3 cowards. Maybe when I'm dead, maybe then. Someone else will call him, and then he will have no choice but to come. Someone will call him and tell him, your big son dead. Then he will come. Then he will know that I wanted him, that I called and he did not come. Call your father now. Big, ugly, bulky boy whose name I do not know, on the right edge of the circle of 3 that converge on me. Your father not coming now? So I live in a shack. I live in a cane field. So your father going and chase me out like a dog. Your father is a bad man. You call him. I don't see him. Call him now. He has spoken my thoughts into that hot day. He should not have done that. My hatred for my father is my own. So I choose him. I choose him now. That boy of 16 years or so, 2 years older than me, a head and a half taller, big and broad, like a mature footballer with a knife in his hand, as long as my arm, and a mocking snarl on his face. I choose him this day to die with. I am at his throat, from crouching in the dust through the air so fast, it is as if the earth has tilted to meet his slamming back. There's no strategy to the attack, no form to the madness. I am an animal broken loose, teeth bared, biting, sinking into dirty flesh till blood runs down my face. Head butting, stiff arms tightening around an ugly neck, knees pumping, kicking, legs flaying. angry animal gurgling and savage grunts coming from me. It is expelling something deep and deadly in the dirty place. On this hot, dusty road, I shall vomit everything here and now. For I shall not return from this place. I shall not return to be anything he wants, not to ambition and good grades, not to school and vacant parent-teacher chairs, or the empty stands where I compete in athletics. I shall not return to a lonely home and a mother who tells me to turn the cheek all the time, nor to the empty spaces of my room and the echoes of the empty promises on a voice so strong, a smile so sweet, a face so godly. I shall not return from this place. I shall kill him now. I shall die right here with him, with this ugly, thick, smelly person. I shall kill him now and die right here in the hot dust of a strange and ugly street. Right here, right now, I shall die for him. I shall die with him. I, with this empty space that I see is my father. Call your father now. Leave me alone. Police people, I do not want to know. I almost killed him. Call your father now. Leave me alone. Hospital people, leave the knife right there, buried in my shoulder. Call your father now. Leave me alone. Mother people, I do not know. I cannot tell what is wrong with me. Call your father now. Leave me alone. Father people, let the skull drop from your face, for I called and you did not come. I wanted you and you were not there. You are never there. And when I need you, leave me alone, Father, for when I call, when I need you, you do not come. Call your father now, nah? No, I will not call him. I have no voice to call. I am alone and I am empty. I have no one to call. I have no father to call. I have no one. I am alone. Let me die alone. I have no one. I have no father. Call your father, call your father, call your father. Father, father, father. Thank you.
Okay, Auntie Shireen with the sleepy little owl. You go right ahead when you're ready.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to talk about the sleepy little owl. Little Owl was a tiny screech owl. His feathers were soft and fluffy, with flecks of brown and yellow. He lived with his mother and father in the tallest tree in Owl Wood of twigs and grass. During the day, the owl family slept. At night, Mother and Father Owl went hunting for food. Little Owl stayed home, snug in his nest, waiting for the time when he could go out on his own to play. One morning, just before bedtime, Little Owl decided he wanted to play with the daytime animals. Mother Owl told him, "Night owls play at night and sleep during the day. Now it's time to hop into your nest and close your eyes." But Little Owl had other ideas. He tucked his head under his wing. With one eye open, he listened and waited. When Mother and Father Owl were sound asleep, he hopped over to the nearest branch. Then he took another hop and another, and soon he was down on the ground. The green grass made a soft carpet for Little Owl. He jumped and hopped about, looking for friends who were wide awake and ready to play. Just then, Little Owl saw a small meadow mouse darting through the grass. Little Mouse was frightened when she saw Little Owl. She knew that owls hunted by night, but she had never met one during the day. "It's my bedtime," cried Little Mouse, running into the woods. "You won't catch me." "I'm not trying to catch you," Little Owl screeched at her, but Little Mouse had disappeared. Before he knew it, Little Owl was getting sleepy. He had never been awake in the daytime, and the bright sunlight hurt his eyes. Then Little Owl heard a strange noise. Rat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat-tat. Looking up, he saw a woodpecker drilling a hole in a tree. Little Owl said to the woodpecker, "Oh, I'm so sleepy. May I rest in your nest?" The woodpecker stopped his tapping. "I have no nest," he said, "but you can rest in this hole." Little Owl hopped up and tucked himself inside the hole. But the woodpecker's bed was made of wood chips drilled from the tree. It wasn't padded with soft grass and leaves like Little Owl's nest. "This is too rough for my feathers," said Little Owl. He thanked the woodpecker and hopped on his way. Soon, Little Owl came to the edge of a pond. A frog sat sunning himself on a lily pad. Little Owl said to the frog, "I'm so sleepy. May I rest in your nest?" The frog answered him with a croak. "I have no nest, but you can rest on a lily pad like me." Little Owl hopped onto a lily pad. He tucked his head under his wing, all set to sleep. The lily pad felt damp under his feathers. The water rippled and rocked him back and forth. "Oh, this makes me dizzy," said Little Owl. He thanked the frog and hopped on his way. Soon Little Owl met a chipmunk. He yawned and said, "Oh, I'm so sleepy. May I rest in your nest?" "I have no nest," said the chipmunk, "but you may sleep in my burrow underground." Little Owl squeezed himself into the chipmunk's hole. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. All around him, there were piles of acorns, nuts, and seeds for the chipmunk to eat. "It's too crowded in here," said Little Owl. He thanked the chipmunk and hopped on his way. Little Owl was lost. Nothing looked familiar to him. The daytime animals were friendly, but he couldn't stay awake to play with them. He longed to be in his cozy nest of grass and leaves next to Mother and Father Owl. "If only I could find my way home," he cried. Little Owl hopped along until he bumped into a tree stump. He was so tired he could go no further. He found a soft bed of moss to rest on and fell sound asleep. Little Owl slept the whole afternoon and dreamed of home. When evening came, Mother Owl and Father Owl woke up. They stretched and they yawned and looked all over for Little Owl. But Little Owl was missing. Mother and Father Owl flew off at once to search the woods. Down below, a mole was climbing out of his hole in the ground. When he heard the owls flying overhead, he was afraid Father Owl was out to catch him. "Don't run away!" Mother Owl screeched loudly from above. "Please, have you seen our little owl?" "No," answered the mole. "I just woke up." "Thank you," said the owls, and they flew off. Next, they saw an opossum hanging by her tail from the branch of a tree. She was just about to bite in a crunchy crab apple. Mother Owl and Father Owl called to her. "Please, have you seen our little owl?" "No," said the opossum. "I've been asleep, and all I can see from here is crab apples." "She's no help," Father Owl whispered to Mother Owl. The owls flew on until they spotted another night animal, a raccoon. The raccoon was poking around outside his home in the hollow of a tree, looking for some nuts and berries to eat. "Please," cried Mother Owl, "have you seen our little owl?" "No," said the raccoon. "How could I? I've been sound asleep all day." Now Mother Owl was really worried. "Wait," she said to Father Owl. "The night animals can't help us. Little Owl left home in the daytime while they were fast asleep. So let's ask the day animals, said Father Owl. Then he opened his eyes very wide. But now it's evening and they're all sleeping. Mother Owl and Father Owl flew through the dark woods screeching, "Wake up! Wake up! Has anyone seen our little owl?" "I saw him," said a sleepy woodpecker. "He headed for the pond." Mother Owl and Father Owl flew to the pond. There they saw the frog sleeping on his lily pad. "Wake up!" Mother Owl cried. "Have you seen our little owl?" The frog hopped up in surprise, landing in the water with a splash. "I saw him," said the frog. "He headed for the willows." Mother Owl and Father Owl sped over to the willows, calling, "Wake up! Wake up! Has anyone seen our little owl?" The chipmunk peeked out of his hole in the ground. "I saw him," he said with a yawn. "He headed for the meadow." Mother Owl and Father Owl flew off, looking down with their sharp nighttime eyes. Finally, they spotted a tiny sheep nestled in a bed of moss next to a tree stump. It was Little Owl. He was fast asleep. Mother Owl and Father Owl swooped down and hugged the Little Owl. Little Owl hopped onto Father Owl's back, and all three of them flew home to their nest of grass and leaves high up into the tallest tree in the forest. "What an adventure," Mother Owl said to Little Owl. "Did you make new daytime friends?" "I tried," said Little Owl, "but I couldn't keep my eyes open." Pretty soon, night settled in over Owlwood. Moonlight spread over the treetops. Stars came aglow in the sky. All the daytime animals were sound asleep, but not Little Owl. He was wide awake, and now he knew that nighttime was his time to play. The end.
Clarine Stewart. Her camera is already on. Hello, Mrs. Stewart. And she will be reading for us Passport to Paradise. Without any delay at all, Mrs. Stewart, you go right ahead. Passport to Paradise.
Night, everyone. And this is Miriam Warner Vieira's Passport to Paradise, translated by Betty Wilson. Eloise was a strong countrywoman, tireless and carefree as a carnival night. At 30, she had a lovely family, 4 boys and 4 girls, who were bursting with great health. Her pregnancies had never stopped her from doing her work. She did not suffer from any of the usual discomforts other women experienced. Florette, her eldest, now almost 9, was already her mother's right hand. Eloise took her last baby, just 3 months old, to the field with her every day. In a basket which she carried on her head, securely balanced on a cutter of rolled up rags. She put down her baby in the shade, where she could see him, under the watchful eye of one of the bigger ones who were given the task and attached to their work. Their cane crop had all been harvested the day before, so that day she had begun to weed her vegetable garden, as she always did. She sang one of the old tunes which came from deep in her memory to keep time with her hoe as she dug up the weeds. She loved her man, her healthy children, her clean house. She was blessed with the strength and the courage to work. For her, that was what happiness really meant. Eugenio had just delivered his last cartload of cane to the Touroussier's factory. He would still have to wait several days before he could exchange the slip he had been given for a few banknotes, which would be barely enough to wipe out his debts at the store and allow the family to eke out their meager existence by the grace of God until the next crop. He was tired. At 40, he had spent 30 years at hard labor in the fields and clearing. That clear liquid which he constantly consumed was certainly partly responsible for his being old before his time. But he did not know that. Besides, his physical weariness did not dampen his zest for life. His wife's good planning and her enthusiasm for work relieved him of all domestic chores. He loved her very much. But he was also a man with a craving. A fervent disciple of the god Tahir, he had, as a final will and testament, asked his wife Eloise to put a little flask of his fire water in his coffin whenever he was ready to depart this world. That day, Eugenio stopped in front of Miss Adelaide's rum shop at about 5 o'clock. He shouted, "Whoa!" to his 2 mules and drummed down from his cart to have a few drinks with his regular companions before dinner. He rarely remembered the taste of this meal because then he was usually drunk enough to sleep with his eyes wide open on a pile of stones. Trouble don't set like rain. He had hardly had time to swallow his first drink when an altercation broke out between 2 men. Eugenio, who was still quite sober, unlike the others, attempted to calm them down, but to no avail. The quarrel grew louder and louder, and they came to blows. The first was fatal. A bottle split open his skull. Eugenio's. He sank silently to the ground, died with one last hic, blood smelling of rum trickling from his mouth. Eugenio's friends gave him a memorable week. Their favorite liquid flowed freely. The next day, very, very early, Eloise dispatched a friend and neighbor to see Monsieur le Curé, their village priest, to ask him if he would kindly come and bless the body. She did not have the wherewithal to give him a first, second, or even third-class funeral. Still, as a believer, it was very important to her for the body to be blessed and for the priest to recite one of his prayers in Latin, the key that will open the gates of heaven. The neighbor came back with the priest's reply, as serious as it was unjust. Eugenio, a notorious alcoholic, living in sin, had died without going to confession. No act of contrition, no absolution, no extreme unction, no benediction. When she heard the news, Eloise felt like the blood rushed to her head. A multicolored veil, mostly red and black, blinded her vision. For a moment, she could not even speak. Her man was going to burn in hell, not because of his sins, but because he was poor and black. The rich Beckers of the land openly kept several concubines. Their skins and their eyes had the greenish tint of the absinthe which they drank like coconut water, and which aged them as rapidly as the cartman's white rum. Yet, when one of them died, he was given the grandest of funerals. The whole clergy, in their white robes, walked in procession before the hearse with crosses and banners. Masses sung in Latin were celebrated for months on end for the repose of their souls. Faced with Eloise's deep depression, Eunice, her neighbor, remembered a stranger who had recently arrived from Asia. Everyone in the marketplace said he possessed the power to make amulets, which were passports to paradise. You had only to lay the charm on the chest of the deceased, and he was sure to go to heaven. Eloise was ready to try anything to save her man's soul, even if she had to give hers to the devil in exchange. She gave Eunice her most valuable possession, a ring that Eugenio had given her on the day that they had set up house together 10 years ago. Eunice set off in search of the magician, and 1 hour later, she brought back the precious Baeticum. It was a piece of goat skin on which there were strange markings, Chinese or Arabic characters. To the two women, it was one and the same. Eloise kissed the sacred parchment and entrusted it with her love as well, to go with the beloved on his journey. She placed it on Eugenio's bosom, under the only white shirt he had ever possessed in his whole life. At that moment, she experienced the relief of having done her duty, and she felt almost happy. Eugenio's soul would fly up to paradise in spite of the cure, and on the day of her death, she would be reunited with him on high. A week after the burial, the whole village in the little commune of Grandfort de Sainte Agnes learned with great consternation that the vendor of tickets to the great beyond had been arrested by the police for fraud. A word which no one knew and which they had trouble pronouncing. It came out as fraud, 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 fraud. To cut a long story short, a high civil servant came from town and questioned the man about his powers. Of course, it had not occurred to anyone that to prove a crime had been committed, it was necessary to demonstrate that the merchandise sold, in this case, talismans, was useless. That no one could prove, and no departed had come back to complain that the gates of heaven had remained closed to him. Therefore, for want of tangible evidence, there being no criminal act, they were obliged to release the prisoner. All the humble people in the village applauded heartily. The stranger set himself tirelessly to the task of giving every person in the village his celestial safe conduct, ready for a moment of departure. Those who by day loudly proclaimed their disbelief, by night slunk along the fences, secretly to procure their amulets in order to hedge their bets. Even the Quimboseer, after invoking the gods of Africa, thought it prudent discreetly to get himself this additional assurance of a good seat on the sailing ship for the great voyage back to Guinea. The last I heard, our Merlin of the islands was mixing lamb's blood with China ink to increase the effectiveness of the heavenly passport. The only dissatisfied people in the village were the members of the clergy, because needless to say, now not a single soul came to ask them to say masses for the dead. Heaven open to everybody, and sin gone out of use. Man's imagination can certainly go to unfathomable depths.
So the next person we have coming to read for us is Miss Jennifer Hodge. Her camera is already on and she looks stunning as usual. Mrs. Hodge is going to read for us The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. So the younger people online with us now, they're going to really enjoy this story about Peter Rabbit. Okay, Miss Hodge, when you're ready, you go ahead.
Good evening. It's after 6. Good afternoon, everyone. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. Now, my dears, said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella to the baker's. She bought a loaf of bread, brown bread, and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, or he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbage and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed, "Ka-choo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and he tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp and sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttled underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the woods outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice, soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.
Rolling right along, we go with the next story, and the next story is Bot. Bot by Samuel Selvon, and it is going to be read by yours truly, Debbie. Yeah? So let me get this thing open. I had it open. Right. So the next story is Bot. It is another excerpt from The Lonely Londoners. If you have never read The Lonely Londoners, you need to get in and read it. Samuel Selvon, like Mr. Motilal said in the chat on Zoom here, Samuel Selvon is one of the greatest proponents of dialect nation language in English. He's one of the greatest, or was one of the greatest Caribbean writers that we have ever seen. And we feature his work here as often as we can. If you have never read The Lonely Londoners, I encourage you to get yourself a copy. I believe that you can find copies of it on Nallis, right? Go on the Nallis OPAC and just search for Samuel Selvon and see everything that comes up. There are excerpts of his work all over the internet. Find Samuel Selvon's work and get in and read. Yeah? And I am going to read for you Bart. right? So here we go. Like Cap, Bart moving from place to place week after week, though he paying rent, he too afraid to get in trouble in this country, and he not as brazen as Cap. One time in Camden Town, Bart get a small room, and he falls sick, and he nearly dead in that room. He get pale and had fever, and he coughing like a bass drum. Moses went to see him. Bart lie down there on this bed like he dead. When he start to cough, he's scattering blanket and shaking up like a old engine. What happened to you, Bart? Moses say, sitting down on the edge of his bed when he finished shaking. Oh God, old man. Oh God, old man, is weak I sick now. Is a week I sick now. And I send message to you long time. Is only today you come? I couldn't come earlier, boy. What has happened to you? Moses, boy. I feel like dying. Moses, boy, I feel as if I go dead right now. And Bart rattling down some cough from deep down. An English fella wearing glasses come in the room with a cup of oxo and give it to Bart and went back out. You see that fella? Bart say. If it wasn't for he, I dead already. He giving me oxo regular and that keeping me alive. But fellas like Bart, ordinary death through illness ain't make for them. In a few days, the old Bart was back in circulation. Though Bart thirsts for woman, he can't make a note with them, no matter how hard he try. So at time when he hold on to an English thing, he hold on tight. Man, the girl always want to go theater and cinema and shows, he complained to Moses. She does leave me real broken. Well, Moses say, you want to play gentleman, you go out to pay for it. If you see Bart girl sitting in the tube with her legs crossed, reading the Evening Standard through rimless glasses, you wouldn't think she used to hang out by the Paramount on Tottenham Court Road in the old days before the law clean up the joint. But if you tell Bart that, he vexed too bad because he real serious about this girl. In fact, he going steady. And at last, he tell Moses and the boys that he make up his mind to marry this girl. He's a damn fool, Moses say. Is that you want to marry? Mind what you say about my girl, Bart say. The girl tell Bart to come home and meet the folks, and Bart went. The mother was friendly, and she went in the kitchen to make some tea, leaving Bart sit down in the drawing room. He make himself comfortable and was just looking at a Life magazine. And then the girl father come in the room. You, the father shouted, pointing a finger at Bart. You, what are you doing in my house? Get out this instant. And old Bart started to stutter and how he's a Latin American, but the girl father wouldn't give him a chance. Get out, I say. The father wanted to throw Bart out of the house because he didn't want no curly hair children in his family. Bart had was to hustle from the white people house and he go morning to the boys. Still, for him, girl so hard to get, he still meeting the number, frightened that he wouldn't be able to get another. But one thing lead to another thing, and she started to slack off, and the old Bart bit by bit. And one day, he was to meet she by the bus stop on Edgware Road. He take a bus and was going up there when he noticed a fella was talking to she in the queue. Bart stay on the bus and he get off at the next stop and he begin to walk down the road slowly. When he get back to the queue, the fella wasn't there. He asked the girl if she was talking to anybody while she was waiting. And she say, no. All that evening, Bart cold to the girl, frightened that she was making a date with this fella. And he couldn't understand why it is she say she wasn't talking to nobody. I did see her talking to the fella in the queue, Bart say at last. I can't remember, the girl say vaguely. Somebody had asked me how to get to St. Stephen Gardens, but He left after I told him. But Bart had a feeling that she'd given him the horn regularly when they're not together. Eventually, the girl moved from the place where she was living, and Bart can't find she at all, at all, at all. And he started to get frantic. He looked all about, and anytime you see any of the boys, you see Beatrice anywhere? You see Beatrice anywhere? Beatrice, you see she anywhere? Remember the girl I was dealing? Beatrice, you see she anywhere? You see she anywhere? Nobody see Beatrice nowhere. Bart must be combed the whole of London, looking in the millions of white faces, walking down Oxford Street, peering into houses, taking the tube ride on the inner circle, just in the hopes that he might see she. For weeks, the old Bart hunt until he become haggard and haunted. Knowing that she liked the night lights, at last Bart get her work in a club as a doorman, and it's how night after night after night he will be standing up there, hoping that one night the old Beatrice might come and lie in the club and he will get to see she again. It have man like that in the world too. At the end. Now, if you want to find out more about what happened to Cap and Bart and whether or not Bart was able to find Beatrice, then you need to read Samuel Selvon's The Lonely Londoners. It is a very entertaining book, and the way that Samuel Selvon talks about life in London at that time, this is the 1940s, 1950s, right? Racism was rampant in London. There was a lot of tension between white people and Black persons that had gone over to England from the West Indies. Yeah. And Samuel Selvon is able to talk about all these very serious themes with humor. So if you want to find out a little bit about history and you want to laugh while you're learning, The Lonely Londoners is the book for you. We're going to move right along to our next item, Mrs. Judith Debole. Mrs. Debole is going to bring for us, she's going to read for us, an excerpt from Helen Steiner Rice's A Celebration of Mothers. So Mrs. Debole, you go right ahead and read when you're ready.
What a joy there is in being a mother. We are blessed with little lives to have and hold, to nurture and love, to protect and cherish. What an awesome challenge. What a wonderful opportunity. What a blessing from the Lord. From the day we hold our children in our arms, we are awestruck by the sight of 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and the innocent, loving eyes of the miracles that God has wrought. And we are forever changed. As each day passes, we watch our children grow. Soon they are walking and talking. And before we know it, we're sending them off to kindergarten. Then, after struggling through the adolescent years, they are graduating from school, leaving our nest, beginning new lives and starting the cycle of life all over again as they form new families of their own. And we are left with the memories of what seems like just yesterday, when we held them in our arms, counted their tiny fingers and their 10 tiny toes, felt their baby breath upon our necks, and reveled in their soft grunts and groans, sighs and cries, wiles and smiles. Allow God to fill your heart, mind, and spirit with hope and love as you celebrate your life as a mother, today and every day, through the good times and the bad. Take strength from God, who, like us, has no greater love than of that for his children, and rejoice in the celebration of mothers. Thank you.
Denise is going to give us an overview of Christmas across the Caribbean. So all the traditions that take place in all the different islands and territories of the Caribbean, Denise is going to give us an overview of that. So Denise, you go right ahead when you're ready.
Nice. Christmas across the Caribbean. How do you celebrate? There is nothing like Christmas in the Caribbean. First off, there's sun, warm wind, and sea and sand. But most of all, people put more emphasis on the festival beginning early on in December with cleaning and preparation, as well as the endless parties and, of course, shopping for all the various Caribbean delicacies and drinks that make Christmas in the Caribbean incomparable. Here are some unique Christmas traditions from islands across the region. So we're going to start with St. Lucia. St. Lucians celebrate the holiday season with a boost. Many young boys fashion bamboo stalks into homemade cannons using kerosene, sticks, and a bottle lamp, and compete with one another to get the loudest explosions. There is also the Festival of Lights and Renewal, which begins December 13th and features a lantern making competition and the decoration of towns and villages with lights. The celebration honors the patron saint of lights, St. Lucy, with a switching on of the Christmas lights and a lantern making competition. St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Nationals of St. Vincent and the Grenadines have the annual 9 Mornings Festival each Christmas. Every morning, starting 9 days before Christmas, locals wake up before dawn and fill the streets to participate in a range of celebratory activities, from sea baths to costume dances to bicycle rides. The Bahamas. The Bahamas' most treasured and well-known traditions is Junkanoo on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, where masked revelers sing, dance, and drum their way through town streets in an exuberant parade. Grenada. Every year, the Kariakou Parang Festival is held the weekend before Christmas. Free open-air concerts feature parang bands from throughout Grenada. After the daytime celebrations, the parang bands go house to house playing carols and entertaining neighbors well into the night. Jamaica. Jamaicans celebrate by going to church, exchanging gifts with their families, and gathering for a large meal. Dinner on Christmas Day, the biggest feast for Jamaicans, includes chicken, oxtail, curry goat, roast ham, and rice and gongo peas. Gongo peas is a Christmas specialty for Jamaica, usually ripened in December. Throughout the rest of the year, cooks use red peas with the rice. Jamaicans also prepare roast beef and or pork as well. Another holiday specialty is Jamaican-style Christmas cake made of fruit soaked in rum. The drink of choice for Jamaicans during the Christmas season is sorrel. Made from dried sorrel, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, sugar, orange peel, and rum, the beverage is usually served over ice. The music of the season reflects local culture, so it's not surprising that reggae Christmas carols add a Jamaican twist to old favorites. Dominican Republic. For those living outside the cities in the Dominican Republic, groups of singers stroll through the neighborhood singing traditional Dominican folk songs about Christmas. Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, you'll hear American carols, Feliz Navidad by Jose Feliciano and the traditional Posada songs. early in the month. In homes, kitchen tables are cleared and women gather to form the assembly lines that will prepare dozens of pastels. The men must make the local lechonera or the traditional suckling pigs are slow roasted over hardwood fires. Blood sausage morcilla is also prepared from the pig's innards, and arroz con granules, rice and pigeon peas, fragrant with annatto and seasoned with cooking ham, is served at Christmas. The meal is finished off with small glasses of coquito, the Puerto Rican eggnog that comes in seemingly endless variants. Barbados. After unwrapping gifts and demolishing the Christmas meal, Barbadians might retire to the Queen's Park for the annual police band concert. French Caribbean. The Christmas season lasts longest for the French islands, which continue to celebrate until Three Kings Day on January 6th, commemorating Le Roi, or the coming of the three wise men. This is the day when people everywhere take down their Christmas trees, even in islands where the date is not significant. Belize. Belizeans are entertained by John Canoe bands with their costume drummers, chanters, and dancers at Christmas, and their Christmas trees decorating come mainly from the mountain pine ridge in Belize. A holiday favorite in Belize is a rum and eggnog concoction called rum popo. Trinidad and Tobago. Parang is also a festival held at Christmas time in Trinidad. The instruments used by parang bands include the bass drum, iron guitar, cuatro, violin, maracas or shak-shak, mandolin, saxophone, tambourine. Songs use calypso-like themes. Christmas music now also includes parang soca, a blend of soca music and parang. Trinidad's Christmas cuisine include the usual Caribbean favorites, but also pastels and stewed pigeon peas. Poncha creme is also very popular. Guyana. Christmas in Guyana used to feature masqueraders going door to door wearing ghost-like costumes and dancing for money. Costumes included Long Lady, nicknamed Boom Boom Sally or Mother Sally, a figure in a flowing skirt on tall stilts and with the face of a woman and a cow, a wood and fabric structure in the shape of a cow that had an opening for a man to place it around him. One of their popular chants was, "Christmas come but once a year, and every man must have his share, but the poor man in the jail, drinking sour ginger beer." The food preparation in Guyana starts way before the day for black cake, ginger beer, and garlic pork. Other special items include pepper pot, which is a must on Christmas morning. Haiti. Traditionally, a few days before Christmas, Haitians would cut pine branches to serve as Christmas trees, or they would go to the market and get freshly cut trees brought from the mountains. At the base of the Christmas tree, they would add a fairly large nativity scene, which could occupy a large part of the living room. They depicted a cave manger with Mary, Joseph, baby Jesus, the wise men, and sculptured stable animals, complete with hay. On Christmas Eve, the children would place their shoes, nicely cleaned up and filled with straw, on the porch or under the Christmas tree for Papa Noel or Santa Claus to remove the straw and put his presents in and around the shoes. Many Haitians drink anisette on Christmas Eve, which is a mild alcoholic beverage prepared by soaking anise seed leaves in rum and sweetening it with sugar. Montserrat. A number of celebrations coverage around Christmas time in Montserrat, including the house caroling, masquerade competitions including Moko Jambi, Bullman, etc., and a Miss Montserrat show. The traditional fare at Christmas time is roast pig, goat water, which is stewed goat meat cooked on a wood fire, potato pudding, and dupna. St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts has a carnival over the Christmas holidays. One huge party with music and dancing in the streets. It features calypso, steel bands, the big drum and five corps, masquerade, and children's dancing troops. The bull, Moko Jumbies, clowns, and string bands. Festive foods include black pudding, goat water, conchs, johnny cakes, and roti. There are also competitions such as the Queen Show, the Calypso Monarch competition, and the Caribbean Talented Teen competition. Just 2 more to go. Suriname. In Suriname, Christmas begins early. Children put out cookies and milk for Ghetto Pa or Dearest Daddy and his servants who would be busy delivering gifts throughout the country. Ghetto Pa is a black man and his servants are also black. He and his servants leave the children's presents next to their shoes on the morning of December 6th, with poems attached to the gifts. Surinamese celebrate Christmas Day and the following day, December 26th, called Tweed Christagd. Guadeloupe. Midnight Mass is obligatory for the religious, and the French tradition of a réveillon, or a late-night meal, is the norm for many in this Caribbean French depart. Pig is the centerpiece of the Christmas meal in Guadeloupe as well. Ham often has the place of pride at the table, but often it is a fresh ham that is closer to roast pork. Rice with Congo peas is another standby, but at times that is replaced with black-eyed peas and rice. There is also the shrub beverage here, prepared from local rum infused with sweet spices like cinnamon and clove, and further perfumed with macerated clementine peels. And that's your Caribbean overview for today.
And Auntie Alicia is going to read for us a folk tale from Dominica called Compare Lapin and Good Sense. Do you know what a lapin is? L-A-P-I-N. If you know what a lapin is, tell us now. Put it in the chat on Zoom or put it on in a comment on Facebook and let us know if you know what a lapin is. All right, Auntie Alicia, you go right ahead when you're ready.
No. Good evening, everyone. Now, good sense is something most people don't have enough of. Good sense tells you to carry an umbrella with you when the clouds look gray, or tells you to look left and right to be safe when you're crossing a road, or to eat all your greens in order to stay healthy. It has been said that there was a time when good sense grew on trees. They say you could even find it in a flower or a bush, or stuffed in a corner or behind a wall, or just sitting there on the ground. Well, so I have heard. The trouble with good sense was that it wasn't easily visible. It did have a blue hue, which you could see shimmering if you squinted, but because it was so difficult to spot, some folks could not get their hands on it easily. The animals in the forest would compete on a special day every year called Good Sense Day to see who could find and collect the most good sense, and the winner would get a trophy for his or her efforts. Now,
Compere Lapin was a troublesome rabbit, always trying to get more than his fair share of anything he could get his hands on. When Good Sense Day arrived that year, Compere Lapin woke up with a fine plan. Not only did he want to collect the most good sense, Compere Lapin wanted to have all of the good sense for himself. The thing was, Compere Lapin didn't want to collect the good sense himself. He wanted to relax while everyone else collected the good sense for him. So, on the day of the annual competition, Compere Lapin watched as all the animals scurried around the forest trying to collect as much good sense as they could. While they were all scurried about, he did nothing but relax in the sun. The rest of the animals were not impressed. Rascal Compere Lapin thinks he can get away with doing nothing whilst we do all the work, said Compere Dog. Well, he'd better not think he's getting any of my good sense, clucked Compere Cockerel. Or mine, said Compere Goat. When all the animals had collected as much good sense as they could carry, Compere Owl did his best to count up to see who had the biggest pile. It was announced that Compere Duck was this year's winner, and as Compere Owl presented him with the good sense trophy, Compere Lapin took the opportunity to step forward and say, wait, there's a problem. No one was really surprised to see Compere Lapin step forward, as they knew he was up to something. They were curious, though, to hear what he had to say. The problem, said Compere Lapin, is storage. Every year we collect all this good sense, and we have piles and piles of it, but nowhere to put it. When all that good sense is left hanging around, it could cause all sorts of accidents. Now, the other animals could not recall any accidents being caused by the lack of storage for good sense, but no one wanted to be thought uncaring. So they all agreed that finding some storage for the good sense was a good idea. Well, said Compere Lapin, I suggest we put it all in one place and have someone look after it. Good idea, said Compere Turtle. Compere Frog and all the other animals agreed. Just give me all your piles of good sense, said Compere Lapin, and I'll look after it for you. Well, the animals weren't sure about that. Compere Lapin wasn't very trustworthy, and they were very reluctant to hand over all the good sense they had collected just like that. How do we know you won't steal it from us? Compere Frog croaked. Compere Lapin was taken aback. I'm not a thief, he said angrily, but just to prove that I have no interest in your good sense, I will give everyone a receipt. The animals talked among themselves and agreed that getting a receipt from Compere Lapin was a good idea. At least they would know which good sense belonged to whom. So all the animals gave the good sense that they had collected to Compere Lapin, and Compere Lapin gave each of them a receipt. It seemed like a perfect plan, and everyone was happy, but especially Compere Lapin, who had no intention of giving any of the animals back their good sense, receipt or no receipt. Once Compere Lapin had everyone's good sense and all the animals had gone home, he poured it all into a big iron cooking pot. He decided he would hang the pot at the top of a big tree in the center of the forest, far out of the reach of the other animals. He laughed at how foolish they had been, handing over their good sense to him to take care of. Well, he was going to take care of it all right. Now all the good sense belonged to him. Compere Lapin dragged the big iron cooking pot through the tree at the center of the forest. But as he tried to climb the tree, pot in hand, he found the pot was far too big. Compere Lapin didn't listen to the good sense telling him that it wasn't a good idea to be climbing so high with a big pot. And it wasn't long before he lost his balance and dropped the pot. All of the good sense that had been collected scattered all around the forest. Compere Lapin was vexed. He hopped around angrily, moaning about how he had lost all the good sense he had tricked the others into handing over. When the animals in the forest each came to Compere Lapin, bringing their receipts and asking for their portion of good sense, Compere Lapin told them he had tried to keep hold of the good sense for them, but despite his efforts, it had decided to flee from him. So they would have to wait until next Good Sense Day to get some more. The animals were not happy and vowed they would never let Compere Lapin trick them again. The end.